Hey guys, alright, I don't know when this video is going to come out, but I'm going to assume it's very, very, very soon after the Lexus interview, so hopefully you enjoyed that if you decided to watch at least some of it. It is a pretty long video, so I can understand if you didn't watch it, but here's the thing. So this video was originally going to be Cruel's interview, and it was going to be the second version of interviews from Lexus's. It was going to be completely different. Whereas Lexus's interview was really, chill, kind of laid back, more of a podcast type deal. Cruel's interview was going to be scripted, and it was going to be more cinematic. I was going to go in-game, get a bunch of people to sort of, quote-unquote, act out all of the parts of the video, at least for some of it, and I thought, it could be really, really cool. I thought it could. I think it would have made for an amazing video. The problem with doing it like this is I added everybody in my Discord server. Or not everybody. In my Discord server, I have a role called If You Want to Help Record or something like that. And people selected the role if they wanted to help me record for any video. And so I would ping the role if I wanted to. And so yesterday, I needed help filming the Lexus video. And I wanted maybe like 6 or 7 people. There were 6 or 7 people with the role, at least. There are plenty more than that. So I thought, okay, should be good. I added the role, and nobody showed up. Somebody responded in the chat, which was cool and all, but they couldn't make it, so it was fine. Now, here's the thing. For a split second, I was a little disappointed, but I realized a few things. Number one, this was entirely expected. I created the role, I believe it was 10 months ago, and I'm only now using it right now. It took me, 9 or 10 months to finally ping the role seriously. And I can't really be surprised that nobody showed up. Really, that's mostly on me for taking so long to work on any videos, really. And so another thing is the fact that editing a video of such magnitude, the way that I wanted to edit it, it would have taken me hours and hours and hours and hours and hours that I didn't want to spend on another Roblox video. That's the truth. I don't really want to do Roblox videos anymore, not for now. Especially, not really Wizard Life. And so, I kind of wanted to because I don't want to spend so long doing it, I just decided that it just wasn't going to be the same, it wasn't going to be as cool, sadly. But I owe it to Cruel, because I had him tell me his entire story. It took him a little while to tell me as well. So I feel like I owe it to him to at least do something with it. And I have been scripting the video for a while, a few months, very, very, very slowly, but I have been scripting it. And because I have the script finished, I decided that I would just read it out. There's not going to be a ton of visual. It's simply just going to be me reading the script. So it's not going to be as cool as it was originally, but this is what I want to do for this interview. So it's, again, I would like to, Cruel, you're probably watching this, I would like to apologize to you specifically that it's not going to be as cool as maybe I made it out to be, but I think I do owe you this at least. So, and I still think that this is pretty well written, and I think that his story overall is pretty good, so I am happy with making this a video. Now before we start, I do have to say that every single part of this script was told to me by Cruel. I didn't really use any of my personal information. All of it came from Cruel. So if any of the information is not accurate, I wouldn't go and blame anybody or be angry, because a lot of this stuff happened well over a year ago. And, when talking about Wizard Life, it's pretty easy to not remember everything perfectly. But he seemed pretty confident, so I do believe that everything he said here is true. It sounds pretty correct, and so... Alright, with that out of the way, we can get started. Cruel first joined Wizard Life in the third quarter of 2018. At this time, one of the largest groups was Z Family, which he was part of. He spent a majority of his time just watching different wars, occasionally role-playing, and hanging out with a few members of the Z Family. Not long after, he went inactive on Roblox for the rest of 2019 and 2020, but in the middle of 2021, he revisited the game. On his first day back, he ran into Guardian and Tribe, 2 large figures in the newest generation of dueling. He saw them dueling, and for the first time, it fascinated him. He wanted to learn how it worked and practice with them for the rest of the night. The next day, he hopped on and decided to start fights with people so he could continue to practice his blocking and baiting skills. These people he fought were more or less randoms though, so when he first ran into someone actually good at the game, he was not prepared. He also believed that he had already perfected dueling, as his blocking and aiming skills were steadily improving, so his first big fight changed his entire view of dueling not long after. This first fight happened on some random afternoon, and it was against Alatar. For most people, that name might not mean anything, but everyone in the dueling community knows Alatar. He is widely considered to be one of the best North American duelists to ever play. Alatar started the fight by shooting at Krul with the Vada, and Krul naively thought he would win easily. He, of course, did not, and was completely destroyed. After his devastating loss, Krul realized just how little he truly knew about dueling, and was determined to one day become as good as Alatar. Around this time, he met Leon, who he practiced with regularly. Being friends with Leon eventually led to his main friend group, but I'll come back to that in a little bit. On top of practicing with friends, Krul wagered that another way to get better was to get into fights, and he figured that the best way to do that was to create a group. By this time, entire servers had begun to greet Krul when he joined their game, so he thought he was relatively popular enough to build a successful group if he established one. That was when he had the idea to form Valor. Even though it was a pretty standard dueling group, Valor was fairly successful member-wise, with duels such as Nero, Chris, and Shoutout participating in it, and it very quickly gained respect within the community. Even though Krul's determination to become a better duelist than Alatar still existed, he didn't expect Valor to pop off the way it did, so he had little time to train. One night soon after, Krul was vibing in a server when a user named NF7N, also known as Scary, joined the game. Scary was random killing people, so Krul quickly killed him, and a friend of Krul's exploited Scary out of the server. Even though it was a short interaction, remember that name as he'll be back in a second. Valor continued to grow at a pretty decent rate, so much so that two of Krul's major enemies, Ravon and Emperor, created their own group called Legion specifically to go to war with Valor. Krul was super hyped because he loved the fighting part of the game a lot, and going to war was part of why he started Valor in the first place. Not long after Legion was created, Krul noticed that this new group had some pretty decent players like Cryptic Lies, Spade, Reaper, and a few others. He expected to lose his first fight with them because they had a lot of good duelists, but when the day arrived, he was surprised to find that he and his group were actually doing pretty well. After Valor's first victory, there were back and forth wins and losses between the two groups. Valor would win one, then Legion would win, and so on. In the middle of this war with Legion, Krul was yet again vibing in a server when two members of a different group known as the Untouchables randomly attacked Krul and a friend of his. This short interaction spiraled into a war, which was not good news. Not only was this group fairly big, but he was already at war with Legion, so starting another could be dangerous. Krul had become a pretty good duelist, but even he knew that a 2v1 would be tricky to win, so he had to come up with something. And that's exactly what he did. You see, after so many wars against Legion, Krul had gotten to know some of the group's members, and even gained a few small friendships. When he one day joined a server and saw the leader of Legion, Ravon, Krul told him of his situation. Valor was so heavily outnumbered that they were bound to lose the fight they had scheduled against the Untouchables, so Krul asked Ravon if Valor and Legion could team up. Because of how much fighting they'd done and how close they'd grown because of it, Ravon agreed to flip the war and help Valor. This was great news for Krul, but when he told Valor's members, some of them left. Even if Krul had begun to enjoy spending time with some of Legion's members, not everyone in Valor agreed, and that led to a few players leaving. It wasn't enough to deter them, however, and Valor kept secret that on the day of the war they planned with the Untouchables, they would quietly bring Legion with them. However, before the day of the war came, word got out that Valor and Legion were teaming up, and when it reached the ears of John, the Untouchables' leader, he immediately pulled out of the war. Following this failed war day, it took a month of torturing John before he quit the game. Once John was gone, Krul realized that Valor had hit a roadblock. Because the group had gone to war against everyone and people had lost respect for it after they teamed with Legion, he didn't see any reason to continue working on the group. On top of this, Krul was already really close with the members of Legion, so after a bit of deliberation, he decided to disband Valor and stuck with Legion. Following the end of the group, Krul finally ran into Scary once more. He didn't have anyone with him to exploit Scary out of the game, and so they actually had to fight. In case you don't know, Scary is also a duelist that is widely considered to be one of the best NA duelists to ever play, similar to Alatar. So, of course, Krul was absolutely destroyed, arguably worse than in his fight with Alatar. This humbled him yet again, and he began training with Legion. A few weeks later, he met someone new, Ray. He met Ray through Leon, one of his first dueling partners I mentioned earlier in the video. With both of them, he created his main friend group, which also had a few other people. One of these other people was Scary, the duelist from earlier. This main friend group was a little unstable. They had a few fights here and there, and people came and went within this group, but overall, Krul was happy with it. After this came a drier period in Wizard life. A few wars broke out, friends against friends and whatnot, but it wasn't anything detrimental to Krul. In fact, it seemed that these wars gave him a bit of experience, and after they ended, Krul's skill was much more respected. He made a few newer friends, like Ryan and Chloe, but nothing really happened until Ryan invited Krul to join Phantasy Demeanors, also known as PD. The group was owned by Ryan, but also by Dyer, a fairly well-known name in the newer generation of Wizard life. After a bit of time of Krul getting to know some of the members of the group and becoming friends with a few of them, PD opened to the public. Once it opened, Krul realized that some of the new friends he had made were enemies of his older main friend group. Krul wanted to maintain his friendship with his older and newer friends, but his older friends were in a group known as Estelle that was against PD. Because of this, for a short while, Krul split off from his old friend group to be in PD. After Krul broke off from his old friend group and embraced his newer one, the PD and Estelle war began. According to Krul, this war was probably one of the most brutal in the second portion of Wizard life's history, full of multi-hour-long fights in servers, Discord raids, report strikes, toxicity in group chats and in Discord servers, and so on. The war would be too much to cover in one video though, so we can save that story for another time. After a while of this brutal fighting, PD's rage had begun to fizzle out. They no longer felt the intense desire to fight, and one day after they felt victorious, the group shut down. Cruel says that he isn't 100% certain of why the group shut down, but this was his best guess. The PD versus Estelle war was, according to Cruel, the last bringing together of the duelists on Wizard Life. Once the war ended and both groups faded away into the natural cycle of Wizard Life, this is where the true decline began. After PD closed, Wizard Life entered yet another dry era, and some of its members left Wizard Life completely, while others stayed to rebuild their reputations. Cruel was one of the few who stayed behind in the game, and at some point after PD's closing, Dyer, one of the leaders of PD, showed him a baiting technique that made the Avada Kedavra animation completely invisible. For its time, a strategy like this was astonishing. Being able to completely hide your Avada Kedavra in a duel would be extremely overpowered. In total, only 5 people knew of this technique: Cruel, Scary, Dyer, Ryan, and a different older duelist named Scorpion, usually called Scorp. This small group was how Cruel reconnected with Scary after going against him in the PD and Estelle War. At some point, it somehow got out that all 5 of these duelists knew how to do it, and everyone began asking them how it was performed. After the 5 talked about it, they agreed that the strategy was way too overpowered, and wanted to gatekeep it from other duelists who could potentially have used it in a much more harmful way. One of the people who wanted to know the secret was Spade. After a bit of time, Spade managed to convince Scorp to tell him how to do the technique. According to Cruel, Spade offered something in return to Scorp, but we don't know what it was. After Spade found out, the rest of the group agreed that if he knew, everyone should know, because they believed Spade would abuse the power of this invisible Avada on less skilled duelists. Ryan made a video explaining how the technique was done and distributed it to the rest of the community. Today, Cruel regrets leaking the information to the public because he believes that the rest of the group who knew the technique could have driven Spade away from the game and continued to guard the secret, but he knows it's much too late now. At this point, everything began to settle down. A few minor things happened, like Cruel joining a group known as Eastband for a few days before deciding to leave, and him fighting Horror of Hope, another well-known newer generation group, but overall, not much happened. He also decided to host a tournament, the one that I made a video on, and he had a ton of fun doing it, but decided to take a short break after hosting it. After a while of these normal Wizard Life events, the wand animation broke. The wand animation breaking, in my opinion, is one of the most devastating events that has happened in the entirety of Wizard Life's lifespan. At first, Cruel just assumed that it was a big enough bug to get the developers' attention. After all, the game had been updated before when the VIP Game Pass broke, so why would this be any different? But as time went on, people began to realize that there would be no update. A large number of major duelists, including Cruel, permanently retired from dueling because of how much this bug affected gameplay and how much it tainted fighting. Past this point, these duelists that retired occasionally got on to mess with newer players and groups for fun, but that slowly dwindled until they stopped getting on entirely. Cruel was one of the many duelists who left even a speck of influence on the history of the game, and that's why I wanted to tell his story. The sad part about it is the fact that there are so many other duelists with so many other similar and different experiences that it would be extremely hard to cover everything. Today, Cruel says he's a developer who does commissions for people, which is pretty neat. Even though it sucks that he's moved on, it's completely understandable given what slowly happened to Wizard Life over time. For now, all that's left to do for the rest of us playing is to either continue playing, hoping that the game will miraculously update, or move on and occasionally check to see if that May 27th date has changed. And that's it. That's the whole thing that I wrote. I probably would have changed it a little bit, but I decided just to leave it as is because I didn't want to spend too much more time on the video. But yeah, that's it, sadly. There's just one more video left after this. If you enjoyed listening to this, thank you. I know it's kind of anticlimactic, but I don't have as much of a desire as I used to make Wizard Life videos, and so I'm not really gonna force myself to make anything anymore. So after this, I will do one final video, kind of telling you guys what's going to happen next, and then after that, we will just have to see. So, alrighty, thank you for watching. I'll see you pretty soon with the next video.